Good afternoon. My name is Ross Yetnock with CEDM, the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, and I am the Program Director of the Michigan Economic Impact Coalition. This webinar is recorded and will be helping folks walk through how to pull data for the MEIC data collection webinar or data collection initiative. We have Brian Rakavitis with us today.
Hello.
He is formerly of the United Way of Washtenaw County and has spent a couple years working with us on data collection, and then came over to CEDM earlier this year to be the person in charge of our Financial Empowerment Coalition. So with that, Brian has more background in running through TaxSlayer than I do, so I asked him to help pull together some information on how to pull the information we're looking for in the data collection initiative that we do with MEIC. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
All right. Thank you, Ross, and good afternoon, everyone. Ross, can you go ahead and pull up my slides?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I am. So while Ross is getting the presentation all set, like you said, you are unmuted for this. It is a recorded webinar, and so there may be some lengths or potentially awkward pauses. That's just for the folks at home who are listening afterwards, who are actually clicking along on their screens, the opportunity to keep up to a reasonable degree. Feel free to ask questions at any time. You can either do it over the phone or in the question and answer box. Ross will be monitoring that as well as myself as well. So if we do pass it and we don't get to it, please bring it back to our attention because we want to answer everyone's question. All right, so like I said, like Ross said, this is the webinar for the MEIC Data Collection Initiative. This is the TaxSlayer Data Extraction webinar. So today, and let me click over, we are going to be covering some very basic TaxSlayer navigation. Now, my assumption is that for most of you, you have used TaxSlayer or are reasonably familiar with it. So we're only going to spend a little bit of time on that. Then we're going to look at how to pull question statistics. These are custom questions that you created at the beginning of the tax year. So some of you may have different questions. Some of you may have no questions at all if you did not create them. But again, these are all ones that you've created. Same thing goes for custom credits and custom credit reports. These are credits that you, again, created at the beginning of the tax season. And then we have management/site production reports. Now, this is the information that is built into TaxSlayer that TaxSlayer is collecting for you of your clients, and we'll look at that different data. And like I said, this is a wealth of information here, so beyond MEIC, if you're looking at some of the other things related to your clients, always come back to these management reports, both for site production efficiencies as well as to better understand your client base. And then finally, we'll discuss a few basic Excel functions that I find very, very helpful when working with this data that you may or may not be aware of or may not fully comprehend or may not fully understand how to get those functions to work. Just a handful of functions. So no math required. Let Excel do it all for you. Alrighty, so to begin, for most individuals, you should be familiar with the TaxSlayer main login page. So after you've gone ahead and put your username and password in, it's going to take you to the main menu. And for those who are a little less familiar with TaxSlayer, this is the main sort of client, portal where you can either start a new tax return, perform a client search, check to see if you have returns that need reviewing, and in this case, the site does, so hopefully they've got that done before the end of tax season. Then there are configurations and reports. So today we're going to be concerned with the reports section, which some of you may or may not have gone into yet this season. Also, you can see that there is the opportunity to change your tax year. So if you're pulling these reports, you do have to do it per tax year. And so if you've gone back and done prior year returns, you may want to capture that data as well. For those who are clicking along, go ahead and select the Reports tab down here at the bottom. You can see it in the highlighted box. Now, because there are quite a few different reports available to you, one of the first things you're going to see here is that there are IRS acknowledgments, state acknowledgments, and validation errors. During the tax season, you would have used these reports to just check to make sure that your returns were being acknowledged as far as the receipt and acceptance by the federal and state government. You can also run validation errors. For the reports that we're interested in, though, you're going to want to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of the screen. Once you've done that, you're going to see there's additional information here. We'll actually look at question and statistics as well as talk about return questions. These are two opportunities to pull essentially the same data for your clients. The difference being is that one will sort of give you the aggregated statistics, whereas the other one will actually give you the statistics per client. So again, this is an opportunity to sort of create site efficiencies and also get more information about your individual clients that you may find useful for next season. After that, you can see there's the custom reports area where you can pull custom credits. And then finally, there's the management reports, and this is the management report and site production. So starting from the top, we're going to go ahead and go into question statistics and work with that first. So like I said, question statistics provides us with there's two ways to pull it. There's return questions and there is question statistics. We're going to go ahead and use the question statistics, that's the second one down, in order to perform this operation. So if you're clicking along, go ahead and select question statistics. Now, in question statistics, you'll see all of the standard ones that are placed in by the IRS, like other than English, what is used in the household, are you or your spouse a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces, do you or any of your members have a household disability? These three, along with I believe an additional question, are pre-programmed into TaxSlayer and must be completed, or the client must have the opportunity to complete prior to that. Now, what you're seeing here is all the options, French, Korean, other. There would be numbers underneath there based on the responses. Same thing with the yes, no, skip. And then if you scroll over to the right, you'll actually see the totals. Now, thankfully, we have the opportunity to download all of our reports as Excels. So you're going to go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of the screen. Once you do that, you're going to see the opportunity to download as an Excel spreadsheet. Again, this particular site, they were asking in their custom questions, was this a credit-only return? What are the total number of individuals in the household, and things like that. And you may have handled this differently. You may have opted to use some of these questions as custom credits. That's sort of up to you, but again, this is the general way to pull it. So you'll go ahead and download the Excel spreadsheet, and it'll either automatically open or you'll have to select it down in the bottom left-hand corner of your computer to open up the file. So TaxSlayer provides us with a very clunky Excel spreadsheet for custom statistics. I personally do not care for it as much as their prior year version, but what it's going to do is it's going to provide you with the total number based on the question response. You can then go ahead and calculate that by hand. I do recommend either reorganizing your spreadsheet so you're able to use some of the calculations, or you can go ahead and just go through and do them by hand. You'll have up to maybe 10 or 12 questions, so it's not too terribly difficult. For sites that have multiple multiple sites, I would recommend reorienting this so you can get it all into one spreadsheet and total it all at once instead of doing the individual ones. And that's sort of up to you how you best want to handle this. But this is the general output for question statistics. So, any questions about question statistics before we move on? All right, seeing that. So with custom credit reports, you're going to want to go ahead and go back into that same reports tab that we started at, and you're going to want to scroll to the bottom of the screen till you see custom credits report. And just like with custom question statistics, you'll want to go ahead and select that and open it up. Now this one will be slightly different from the question statistics. You're going to see them here. And again, these are credits. These are custom credits that you would have created. So at this particular site, they were asking how much home heating credit did you receive, how much homestead credit did you receive, how much Michigan EITC credit did you receive, Michigan refund, and also taxes paid. With TaxSlayer, they do not pull state credits the same way that it allows you to access federal credits in the management report. In this particular output, also you're going to see the EFIN associated with your site, the last four Social Security of the client, as well as their last name. This has all been scrubbed for their personal protection, but you would see that in the first three columns. Just like question statistics, you'll want to go ahead and select the Excel download, and either it'll automatically open or you'll need to select the download in the left-hand corner of your screen or go to your downloads in the browser window. The custom credits reports downloads in a much more easy, user-friendly Excel spreadsheet. Like for example, here you can see that we've got a sum equation, so that would total all of the amount of home heating credit that the client received. And so you can kind of go through that. What's nice about this is if you have multiple sites, you can just copy and paste these all into one Excel spreadsheet and manage it that way. And that's kind of the simplest way to handle custom credit reports. Okay. Any questions about custom credit reports? Okay. So the final report that we're going to pull, and probably the most powerful report, both in terms of MEIC data, but also for your own site efficiency and getting to know your clients better, is the management/site production report. And just like the other three reports, we want to go to Office Reports, and so that's the report button from the main screen, and scroll down to the bottom of the screen. Once there, we want to select management reports. Now, unlike the other two, this will actually create a dialog box that will pop up, and it gives you what's known as web reports. So the reason why this is happening is that it's essentially coming from what I understand, the TaxSlayer servers, and you're pulling the saved report because there's quite a bit of confidential client information that can be pulled through these reports, everything from their name to their social security number to the amount of individuals in their household, just kind of almost the entire extent of the tax return can be pulled in this report. So when sharing this data, do make sure that you are scrubbing it appropriately and just being aware that that a lot of personal sensitive information can be found in this report. Much like every dialogue, or much like every page in TaxSlayer, there is quite a bit of scrolling that has to happen. So in this case, you will scroll down, and you're going to go to the section that is Production Detailed Reports. Now, for whatever reason, TaxSlayer separates out reports based on whether or not they were electronically filed or paper filed. And so you will need to pull these reports for both and then combine them. In this case, we're just going to look at the electronic polling because it is identical for paper, but just note that you do need to pull both. So in this case, if you're working on it at home, go ahead and select the Site Production Detail Report Electronic. There's a couple of very important pieces of information that you do need to fill out and that you can change. You will need to select the tax year. You will need to select the starting date and end date. And for MEIC, I assume it is your first day all the way until the close of your season, Ross, or do you want them to the close of tax season?
To the close of their season.
Okay, so whenever your season closes and you make the report to Ross, go ahead and make that your end date.
And if you're a year-round site, you can cut it off with whatever your regular reporting time is. So if, let's say, you routinely report to your funder, local funder, or the IRS, or whoever at this point, that's when you can pull the data for us as well. I don't want you having to pull data separately from what you would normally be pulling.
Now, before you select Run Report for Export, you're going to want to go ahead and also select your EFIN. In this case, it would show up your options to EFIN would be right there. In this case, this site only had one EFIN that they were operating. Once you select that, you can now go ahead and hit Run Report for Export. This will then take you to another dialog box, and before you hit Export, which is that button up at the top there, unfortunately the PowerPoint does not work well in here, otherwise that would be flying in with a little buzzer noise. But you want to go ahead and select Column Selection. If you don't do that, you're going to get the report that has basically all of the information that is available through TaxSlayer's management reports, and that is everything from the EFIN, site ID, first name, last name, social security number, all that stuff, things that we don't necessarily need for MEIC, you may want for other reports. All of those are selected, so the first thing you want to do is to clear them all. So by selecting the Clear All box here. This will then turn all of those options red. That means that you have successfully cleared all information from the report, and nothing would show up if you went to go export it. In fact, I don't think it would even let you export it. One very important thing is if you're working with multiple sites and you are not the person who's actually pulling the data, I would recommend talking to all of the site coordinators responsible for pulling the data and making sure they're pulling the exact same columns. This will save you with a lot of stress later so that you are able to you're able to line up your columns properly. I know that some sites have that difficulty. We do have one question about how to get data from a prior year. And if we just go back a couple of slides, you'll see that there is the tax year option. You can go ahead and scroll that down, and it will give you, I believe, just 16 and 17 are the options currently. So you can get 2016, which prior to that we were on TaxWise anyways. But you personally may have done a prior year for 2014. Unfortunately, with the site production reports, you are unable to pull that information through here. There may be another way, and I'd have to go back and detail that. But right now, if you select the tax year, it's going to give you 17 and 16 are the two options.
And there is a question, and Laura, feel free to ask the question if you're on audio. But if Brian, I think the question is, we did a 2016 this year in 2017, and we did 500 2016s. How do we pull just the data from the ones we did this season
Right. So that I believe, and I would have to double check, but I'm fairly certain it's basically through the start date, end date. You would have to know when you created that, return based on the start and end date, and it's going to pull it for the production that happened at that time. So that's how you're going to be able to grab. So you could go to tax year 2016 and pull start date, end date for current year. And it should not pull any of that prior year data.
Perfect. Yes, that was the question.
Wonderful. Sorry about that.
Perfect. You answered it.
Okay. So back to where we were at. If I could just go forward a few slides. So once you've cleared all of them, they're going to turn red. You then have the option to begin selecting the returns. This one is kind of the most common for information for MEIC that you're looking for. I may have missed one or two, so don't go for this exactly as is. But in this case, I do have some unique identifiers to help me with sorting the table: return type, filing status, total IRS exemptions, refunds, requesting direct deposit, EIC amounts, child tax credit amounts, and I also have Form 8888 to see if they split their refund. So they may have direct deposit, but then they may have gone on and split their refund. Once you've gone ahead and selected all of those, you'll actually scroll back up to the top of the screen where it says column select, and you'll select it again. And like I said, unfortunately, PowerPoint would move this X out of the way, but for our webinar platform, I guess it doesn't work that way. And so you're going to actually export the report now, and that's going to give you all of those columns. You can also save this report so that you can kind of access it later. And like the other reports, it's going to go ahead and it'll either automatically open an Excel spreadsheet, or you'll have to press in the lower left-hand corner in the download dialog box that pops up if you're using Google Chrome. So here you can see the site production and management report inside of TaxSlayer. It's very simple. I recommend switching it to a pivot table if you understand that. But here you can see kind of some of the major pieces of information that TaxSlayer is collecting that the MEIC is interested in. If, for example, you did not, say, collect the total number of individuals under 18, you can use a sort of proxy option by taking the filing status and the total exemptions and essentially subtracting out based on their filing status. So if they're head of household or single, obviously you would subtract 1 from the total exemptions, and you could, for best part, estimate the number of individuals under 18. Again, this is not perfect because some of these individuals that they're getting the exemptions for may be over 18. But that is sort of the closest reasonable estimate that we have if you did not collect that question as a custom credit or a custom question. Anything else to add to that, Ross? Wonderful. All right, so some of this information, of course, is letters, and some of it's numbers, strings, integers. I don't know the difference, but there are some Excel functions that may be of value to you. Obviously, some of the things that we know are things like sum, which is going to give you a total amount, but one of the best places to start are things like sum if, which essentially it will add up all the total, but based on a criteria. So everything is equal to 2,000, or you could even say 2,000 or above, whatever you want. When it comes to working with words instead of numbers, the count if function is very easy to use. Excel will help you work through the process, but the nice thing about count if is it will count the individual cells. So instead of sorting yeses and nos and then counting the total on the side, if you put COUNTIF at the bottom and you make the range all of that information, that column, and then say equal to yes, it will count all of the yeses for you. And so it's kind of an easy way to do that. And of course, then there's average. I'm sure most of us are familiar with that. There are additional functions which you can use in Excel to help with this data, but sum if, count if, and even average if will help you with the majority of the data that you're using today. So that is kind of the basic tutorial on how to pull data and information out of TaxSlayer. At this point, I can open up for questions. We can go back and review some of the processes as you see fit, but any questions at this time?
I did see one question, what should we save the reports in? Laura, I guess my answer would be, and I can send out the template again, but if you can put them in the Word template, or the, Excel template for me, and that may be some cutting and pasting or just entering information in there, that's the easiest for me. However, I've taken them as PDFs. I've taken them however folks will give them to me, but we do have an Excel file template that I will send to everybody.
Oh, okay. But under Excel, I have different options on how to save it, and there's like 20 different options. So,
you can save it.
I'm not an expert on Excel, but while I'm here, I go Save As. I hit my browse. Let me go to Okay, so Save Type As, and then I've got Excel Workbook, Excel Macro, Excel Binary, Excel 97.
Do you have the option to do a .csv?
I do.
Yep, so I would do that. That's kind of the most basic file structure. And that'll work in all Excels.
Okay, .csv.
And also Google Sheets.
Yeah, so that's like the most user-friendly version.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Then I'll be able to, I can go back in it and be able to play with that. Okay, so you want an Excel file in besides the data, because last year I think I just sent you the data, the numbers, without sending you a file. I didn't know you needed an Excel file.
Yeah, I've got a template, and I will send that out to everybody.
But you don't need do you need the original data?
No, I don't need the original.
Just the template.
Just the template.
Yeah, the template, the figures, I put the figures on the template.
Yep. Yeah, that's all I need. There's another question. Some of the questions should be set up at the beginning of tax season. Yeah, and that depends on when folks joined this initiative. It does take the beginning of tax season to kind of figure that piece out. Issues like home heating credit. Brian, is there a way to pull that after tax season?
Unfortunately, because TaxSlayer is mandated, their design is mandated from the IRS, and they're not so concerned with the local taxes. Home heating credit we won't be able to do, but the property tax the earned income tax credit we can do based on sort of the calculation provided, and property tax credit. I will need to go back through on those two credits and see if there's a way to pull that separately. As far as I'm aware, no. So unfortunately, that data is lost without going through each individual return. And depending on the size of your site, that may just be impossible. But for persons under 18, again, you can take the filing status as well as the total number of exemptions, remove the exemptions based on filing status. So if they're single or head of household, that would be a subtract 1. And if they're married filing jointly, that would be a subtract 2. The remaining exemptions, in theory, in general, will represent individuals under 18. That's not a perfect and most accurate representation, but that will get you pretty close. And if you do that, Ross, I don't know if you have a percentage in general of how many individuals are under 18. So there may be an opportunity for us to then calculate it separately.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on trying to do a better job of that. That is one of the reasons to have some of the custom credits, custom questions. And if this is the first year doing this, or if you're just learning how to do this, make notes so that next year it can be set up to collect those custom credits, the home heating credit, property tax credit, because those are big credits for a lot of our customers.
And with that, if you need help setting up those credits next year, feel free to contact us, and I can walk you through the process. It's fairly simple.
Super easy. Super easy.
Yeah.
I will say I would recommend making those required to fill out. It's a bit of a pain for the preparers, but they get used to it. I worked at a bunch of different sites this year and got used to different setups on ways folks were tracking different information, and some had those as a requirement, which meant they all got filled out, and if there was 0, you just had to put 0 there. Others had it optional, and what you often had is the preparers skipping over those fields, particularly around like ethnicity or home heating credit issues like that.
Oh, we do have someone's printer spooling up, so...
Any other questions?
Do feel free to put on mute.
Thank you.
Well, if there are no other questions, feel free to reach out to me or Brian on the nuts and bolts of this. And before we end, if anybody has any other tips they want to share with folks, TaxSlayer, we're still learning how to make this work a little better each year. So if you've learned any tips, we'd love to hear them, and I will open the floor up to that now.
I make everything mandatory. That's the best tip.
Make everything mandatory, yes. That will make sure folks get those filled out, particularly the custom credits.
With your mandatory questions, do you provide a do not answer or decide not to answer option or anything like that?
No. Usually I then just delete the return afterwards if they or deactivate the return if they opt out.
Okay.
And that was, very, very few people will opt out.
Right.
Yeah, some of the questions that folks have asked, and this was through our virtual VITA effort too, we always had a no answer or I'm trying to think like other where it was appropriate. In particular, question like, did they direct deposit? It would be yes, no, not getting a refund.
Mm-hmm.
So, you'd want to kind of rule out those. The other thing I do when I collect the data, and this goes back to the question on even like the home heating credit, I like to try to get a percent of how many of the clients are getting the home heating credit. So, if I get data from 15 sites and one of them hasn't tracked home heating credit, what I then do is exclude their data from the math I do to create a percentage. Their data is still included from the federal and everything else, but when I do the percentages, I exclude that. I get that a lot with ethnicity every year. There's 1 or 2 new sites that came on after the season had just got underway, so we exclude that. Things happen during the season, we realize that, but this is one of the things we were tasked with doing years ago with the coalition, is to find a way to better uniform data collection, because across the state, it's fairly easy to get federal data, but when you start looking at your data, you realize half of the clients are getting a Michigan property tax credit. So if we're not tracking that, it's hard for you to be able to tell your local funders this is a benefit because they're getting upwards of $1,200, or the average home heating credit is $250 at our site, and 1 in 3 people are getting them. That also shows that 1 in 3 clients are at 110% of the federal poverty level or below. So that's why we're trying to encourage folks to collect this data. We use it at the statewide to get a good snapshot of the clients that are being served, both economic and racial breakdown, and some of the other questions we ask, but also locally, I think it can be a powerful tool too when you're reaching out to local funders, things like that. And from the again, the virtual VITA, I track data from that to be able to show the libraries that were participating in Gratiot and Shiawassee County. You're volunteering your time and resources to help this. Well, you brought back, in total, those 2 counties and their libraries brought back more than $130,000 in state, federal, and home heating credit returns. So, that was a good justification for, their time and effort. So the more we can show this data, the more we can really, you guys can at the local level garner more support, and at the statewide level, it's a strong call for some of the advocacy that we hope to continue to be able to do, even as we explore, how this coalition will move forward, moving forward. But with that, any final questions from the group? Hearing none, any last comments from Brian?
No, like I said, if you have any questions about pulling your data, or you're looking to sort of recover some data that you maybe not have as a custom credit or question ahead of time, feel free to contact me, and I'll look at sort of what I have and see if there's any way to pull it. Sometimes TaxSlayer can surprise you and hides data in strange places. Again, with those state credits, it is very hard they don't usually track it. But feel free to reach out if you need any help with that or setting up custom questions next year.
And if while you're pulling data you find any tricks or end up in a TaxSlayer rabbit hole and realize, oh, wow, this is where we can pull this data, let us know so we can share that with others, and kind of, again, this is collaborative learning to some extent as well too. But with that, I will stop the recording. Thank you all for your time, and thank you, Brian, for putting this together, and enjoy your rest of the day.
Have a great day, everyone.